You know that specific moment when you finally upgrade your smartphone?
Oh yeah, the dreaded transfer process.
Right. You sit there, you move all your photos, your apps, your contacts over to the new one, and then you just sort of look at the old device sitting there on the table.
It just looks so sad.
It really does.
Yeah.
In an instant, it goes from being your absolute lifeline to just being like obsolete hardware.
Yeah.
It's probably going to sit in a junk drawer for 5 years because the software, the data, that's the important stuff. The shell, it's just totally disposable.
Right. It served its temporary purpose. It was literally just a container holding the real value.
Exactly. And honestly, if you take a step back and look at how our culture operates today, that is exactly how we have been conditioned to view our own human bodies.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you're anything like me, you probably fall into this trap without even realizing it. So, welcome to the deep dive. We are taking a look at some profoundly paradigm-shifting work today for you.
Yeah, we've got an incredibly dense and fascinating essay today.
We do. It's by Mark Bates, and it's called The Resurrected Body and the Future of Human Identity. And Bates is basically synthesizing some really brilliant theological research from Carmen Joye Ijames and Walter C. Kaiser Jr.
Some heavy hitters.
For sure. And the core mission for you today, as we go through this, is to completely dismantle that smartphone view of your body.
Yes.
We are going to explore how the physical resurrection is actually like the absolute defining factor of human identity.
Which is so needed right now because culturally we are currently bouncing between two incredibly flawed extremes of what it means to be a human being. Bates actually calls it a crisis of human identity.
Okay, let's break those extremes down.
Right.
So on one side, you have this highly secular, modern view where human beings are basically just wetware.
Right, just neurobiological machines.
Exactly. And in that view, your entire worth as a person is tied directly to your functional utility. Like, what can you produce?
What can you compute? How useful are you to the economy?
Yeah, it's super bleak. But then, if you swing the pendulum to the exact opposite side, you hit this heavily Hellenistic, Greek-influenced idea.
And what's fascinating is how much this specific idea has crept into modern religious thought.
Oh, it's everywhere. The old Greek philosophers like Plato, they viewed the material world as flawed or even, evil.
Right.
So in that framework, salvation is all about this wispy, immortal soul finally getting to escape its disposable meat suit.
Just to go float in some ethereal, disembodied celestial state.
The ghost finally escaping the machine. But here is the massive roadblock that Bates throws up. Yeah. When you go back to the original Hebraic worldview and the canonical texts, both of those extremes are totally rejected.
Completely.
You aren't a machine, and you aren't a trapped ghost. Humanity is defined as an integrated, unbreakable unity of body and breath.
Yeah, you don't have a body. You are a body-soul unity.
Which is such a massive shift in thinking. And to really grasp what that identity means for you today, we have to look at the ultimate prototype of this integrated unity in action.
Because everything in this ancient narrative hinges on one wildly specific historical claim.
Right. The physical resurrection of Jesus.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because reading through this material, I realized I have honestly glossed over how aggressively physical the gospel accounts are.
Oh, they go out of their way to make it physical.
They really do. Jesus doesn't come back as a glowing orb. He's not a spectral projection. In Luke 24, his followers are terrified because they literally think he's a ghost.
And he actively has to correct them on that.
Yes. He says, "Touch me and see. For a spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see that I have."
He even asks for food to prove the point.
Right.
Like he eats a piece of broiled fish right in front of them. It's so visceral.
Yeah.
And when you look at the early Christian and Hebraic lexicon, the word they used for resurrection is anastasis.
Anastasis, okay.
Yeah. And that word never, in any context, meant disembodied spiritual survival. It explicitly meant a corpse standing back up again in a transformed physical state.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second, or at least ask the foundational question that I think a lot of people might be wondering right now.
Sure, go for it.
If the ultimate end goal of humanity is just to be in eternity with God, why does the hardware still matter so much?
That is the big question.
Right. Like, why couldn't Jesus just appear as a hologram, essentially saying, "Hey guys, I survived death, my spirit is alive, I'll see you in the ethereal plane"?
Because if the physical body is abandoned at the end of the story, then material creation itself is ultimately abandoned.
Oh.
Think about Genesis. God creates physical matter and calls it very good. If Jesus only survives spiritually, while his physical corpse is left to rot in a tomb, that is just a philosophy of surviving death.
It's not a victory over it.
Exactly. It implies God's original physical creation was a mistake that needed to be thrown away. It is not the redemption of creation.
Oh, wow. So throwing away the body means basically conceding defeat on the material world.
You nailed it. And the Apostle Paul actually uses a very specific agricultural term to explain this in 1 Corinthians 15. He calls it first fruits.
First fruits.
Yeah. In the ancient world, the first fruits were the initial crop you harvested. It wasn't an anomaly. It was the physical guarantee that the exact same kind of harvest was coming for the rest of the field.
So Christ's physical resurrection isn't an isolated parlor trick?
No, it is the prototype. If he kept his physical body, you are keeping yours.
The goal isn't an escape hatch from the material world, it's the total redemption of it. I love the metaphor Bates brings in from C.S. Lewis to illustrate this.
Oh, from The Great Divorce.
Yes. Yeah, he cites Carmen Joye Ijames referencing Lewis's book, and Lewis perfectly captures how backwards our modern assumptions are.
We naturally tend to think of spiritual realities as wispy, thin, intangible clouds.
Right. And we think of our current material world as solid and heavy.
But Lewis flips it entirely. In his vision of heaven, the eternal world isn't thinner than Earth. It's infinitely heavier. It's more solid.
He has this amazing scene where people arrive from Earth as ghosts, and they actually get their feet sliced open by the blades of grass in heaven.
Because heaven's grass is so uncompromisingly real.
Yes. The earthly ghosts are just flimsy shadows in comparison. Heaven is the ultimate dense reality.
Which totally reframes how we view the future. The resurrected body isn't a downgrade into physical limitation. It is an upgrade into ultimate incorruptible reality.
God's design for your physical body isn't annihilation, it's glorification.
Exactly.
Okay, but if the physical body is this eternal upgrade, what happens when I look in the mirror right now?
Right, the current reality.
Yeah, we get sick, our joints ache, we age, we break down entirely. If our physical form is so important, how do we reconcile that with human bodies that are deeply flawed or broken?
And that tension is where this theology gets intensely personal, especially when the source material tackles the concept of the Imago Dei, the image of God.
Because historically, especially in Western thought, leaning on Aristotle and Plato, we've defined being made in the image of God by our capacities.
Right, by what we can do.
The argument was always, humans are in God's image because we possess high intellect, complex reasoning, memory, or advanced relational skills.
Which sounds very noble on the surface.
It does. But when you poke at it, it gets terrifying fast.
It really does.
Because if your fundamental value in your identity as the image of God is based on your intellect or your physical capacity, what happens to a person with a profound cognitive disability?
Or what happens to someone with late-stage dementia or a person in a coma?
Right. If their capacities are diminished, do they suddenly have less of the image of God?
It is a horrifying implication. And what's fascinating here is how diving into the ancient Near Eastern context completely shatters that capacity-based view.
Okay, break that down for us.
So if you lived in the ancient cultures surrounding Israel, like Egypt or Babylon, the image of a god was a very literal, physical object.
Like a statue.
Exactly. It was typically a carved cult statue placed in a temple to act as a physical vessel for the deity. Or it was the human king himself, ruling as the god's literal representative on earth.
And what about just regular, everyday people in those cultures?
In those surrounding mythologies, regular people were usually depicted as an afterthought. They were created basically to be slave labor so the gods could rest.
Wow.
But Genesis 1 flips that entire cultural script. God doesn't just make a single king his image, he democratizes it.
I love that phrase.
Yeah, he places every single human being, male and female, entirely regardless of their capacity as a living statue, a royal representative, in the cosmic temple of creation.
So the image of God isn't a test you pass. It's an ontological status, meaning it is woven into your very state of being by divine decree.
Right. You don't bear the image only when you function at 100%. You are the image simply because you exist as a human.
A disease or a physical impairment might distort how a person functions in this broken current world, but it absolutely cannot erase their ontology.
The royal status survives the brokenness.
And what blew my mind in this deep dive is the proof of that continuity. It's right there in John chapter 20.
The scars.
Yes. When Jesus rises, he keeps his scars. He doesn't come back as this airbrushed, generic, idealized Greek statue with his past erased.
No, he specifically invites Thomas to physically touch the gaping wounds in his hands and his side.
The essay brings in the work of disability theologian Stephanie Tate to explain why this is so profound.
Her work is so beautiful on this.
It is. She points out that if the resurrected Son of God carries his wounds into eternal glory not as defects, but as emblems of grace and redeeming love, then human bodies marked by impairment, by trauma, by surgeries, they are not defective specimens.
Right. They aren't waiting to be thrown out and replaced by a synthetic, perfect norm.
God redeems history. He doesn't just hit the delete key and pretend the pain didn't happen. The scars actually testify to grace, not to defeat.
And knowing that gives such immense, indestructible dignity to every single human body right now, exactly as it is.
It really does. But as we build this case for the physical body, we do have to address a massive point of confusion that I'm sure is in the back of your mind right now.
The Apostle Paul.
Yes, the glaring contradiction. Because if the future is so stubbornly, permanently physical, we have to deal with Paul's letters.
Right.
Because Paul explicitly talks about getting a spiritual body. And in 1 Corinthians 15, he literally writes the phrase, "Flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God."
Which sounds like a deal breaker.
So what does this all mean? It sounds like he is directly contradicting everything we just established about the physical resurrection.
It only sounds like a contradiction because of a massive translation misunderstanding in English.
Okay.
When our modern brains read the phrase spiritual body, we immediately picture a body made out of spirit, something non-physical, like a ghost.
Right, like Casper.
Exactly. But lexical analysis of the original Greek text shows that the contrasting terms Paul uses, Soma Psychikon and Soma Pneumatikon, do not describe what the body is made out of.
They don't?
No. They describe the power source that is animating the body.
Oh. The analogy Bates implies here is so helpful. Think of a windmill versus a solar panel.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. The Soma Psychikon, the natural body we have now, is a physical body powered by mortal, natural human life. It's like a windmill, powered by the wind.
And it's subject to weakness. The wind eventually dies down, the structure decays.
But the Soma Pneumatikon, the spiritual body, is a physical body powered directly by the incorruptible Holy Spirit.
Right.
It's like taking that same windmill and upgrading it into a massive solar array. The physical material of the structure didn't vanish into thin air. It's just running on an entirely different, infinitely more powerful energy source now.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. Paul is talking about a physical body upgraded and empowered by the Spirit, not replaced by a phantom.
Okay, that makes so much sense.
And that also helps us clarify how Paul uses the word flesh, or sarx in Greek.
Because in English, if I say flesh, I just mean skin, muscle, meat.
Right, but Paul uses sarx as an ethical term. Flesh in his letters represents human nature curved inward, rebelling against God. He contrasts that rebellious nature with soma, the physical body itself. Paul explicitly says the soma is created good, bought with a price, and destined for resurrection.
So when Paul says flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom, he is using a well-known Hebraic idiom for mortal weakness and corruptibility.
Exactly. He is not condemning physical matter.
Wait, but that brings up the waiting period. Let's say I die tomorrow.
Okay.
If full salvation is a physical body running on spirit power, what exactly happens to you in the time between your physical death and this promised future resurrection?
The essay unpacks the biblical view of this as holistic dualism.
Holistic dualism. Sounds like an oxymoron.
It sounds like a mouthful, yeah. But it basically means you are an integrated compound. You are a material body and an immaterial soul unified together.
Okay.
When you die, the soul does persist. It preserves your personal identity. But, and this is vital, being disembodied is explicitly viewed as an incomplete and unnatural state.
It's an intermediate state. You aren't, like, finally free of your body, like the Greek philosophers wanted.
Right.
You're essentially a refugee, waiting to get your home back. The human story isn't finished until that persistent self is reunited with a newly transformed physical body.
Which naturally brings us to the destination. We have established that we get guaranteed, restored physical bodies. But where do those bodies actually go?
Here is where things get incredibly cosmic. The deep dive turns to the Ascension, which completely redefines humanity's status in the universe.
Yes.
But before we look up at the Ascension, we have to look down at a garden.
I love this connection.
In John 20, Mary Magdalene is the very first witness to the resurrection. And when she sees Jesus, she initially mistakes him for the gardener.
A detail that is way too specific to be a random historical accident.
Exactly. The author argues this is a deliberate literary echo of Genesis 2 and 3. The first creation fractures the male-female partnership in a Garden of Eden. So the new creation begins in a garden, with the last Adam deliberately commissioning a woman as the herald of new life to the male disciples.
It is actively restoring that original collaborative human vocation.
And it's worth noting how historically awkward that detail is, which actually validates its authenticity.
Oh, definitely.
In the first century Greco-Roman world, a woman's testimony carried virtually zero legal weight in court.
So if the gospel writers were just inventing a myth to convince a patriarchal society, they never would have chosen women as their primary witnesses.
Never. They recorded it simply because it was what actually happened, and it held profound theological purpose.
It reinstates the Genesis design. Male and female, together bearing the image, together stewarding the physical creation.
But then 40 days later, Jesus leaves. The Ascension.
Right.
And I think a lot of people just view the Ascension as Jesus exiting stage left. Like he beamed up, discarded the human flesh like a spacesuit, and went back to being a purely immaterial deity.
But if you read Acts 1 and Acts 7, they show something entirely different. Jesus ascends bodily.
Bodily?
Yeah. The martyr Stephen looks up and sees the Son of Man standing at God's right hand. Glorified human flesh is permanently enthroned in the heavens.
Carmen Joye Ijames points this out, and it's just staggering. She says, a human body, flesh and bone, is a member of the Trinity.
It's mind-blowing.
The destiny of humanity isn't to be demoted into playing harps as immaterial angels.
Yeah.
It is to be elevated in union with the Messiah to actually rule over creation.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this directly ties into what Walter C. Kaiser Jr. calls God's promise plan.
The promise plan.
Yeah, because in Western theology, we often reduce the whole human crisis to just one single event, Adam and Eve eating the fruit in Eden.
Right, the fall.
But the ancient canonical worldview saw compounding, layered cosmic rebellions that all had to be solved.
Yes, the essay outlines three major fractures. First, Eden in Genesis 3, which brought death and exile to humanity. Right. Second, the rebellion in Genesis 6. Ancient readers understood this as a cosmic boundary violation. Spiritual authorities crossing over to corrupt the earthly realm. And third, Babel in Genesis 11, which was the disinheritance and fracturing of the nations, where God hands the nations over to lesser spiritual beings.
And the physical resurrection and bodily ascension of Jesus are the mechanism that addresses every single one of those fractures.
How does it do all that?
Well, by physically conquering the grave, he breaks the curse of death from Eden. By ascending bodily to the cosmic throne, he disarms and reclaims authority from those rebel spiritual rulers of Genesis 6.
Wow.
And by pouring out the Spirit at Pentecost, where every language is miraculously understood, he begins the reversal of Babel. He's reclaiming the disinherited nations.
He pulls the scattered nations back together.
Exactly.
And this is key, he does it without erasing the original promises made to physical Israel. The essay highlights Kaiser's focus on non-supersessionism.
Right. Non-supersessionism is a heavy academic term, but it simply means the Gentile church does not replace or overwrite ethnic Israel.
Yep.
If God promised a physical inheritance to Abraham, he doesn't just change his mind and give it to someone else.
The analogy I think of is adoption. If you promise your oldest child an inheritance, and then you adopt more children, you don't take the inheritance away from the first child.
No, you expand the family estate.
Right. The Apostle Paul, in Romans 11, uses the image of an olive tree. The Gentiles are grafted into the existing physical, historical promises. They don't chop the tree down and plant a new one.
Redeemed humanity from every nation ruling together on a restored earth.
Which ultimately brings this entire massive cosmic theology crashing right down into our daily lives.
It really does.
Because if you have this guaranteed physical destiny, a permanent body on a permanent renewed earth, how does that dictate what you do on a random Tuesday morning?
Right. Does this actually change the way you go to work or how you treat your neighbors?
The essay cites an ethicist named Oliver Donovan, who argues that Christian ethics utterly depends on the resurrection.
How so?
Because if the material world is just disposable packaging, then ethics is basically just a stoic endurance. You just try to survive, keep your hands relatively clean, and wait to escape.
But because the physical body is permanent, how we treat bodies right now carries eternal cosmic weight.
Exactly. The essay lays out three incredibly practical, very sharp implications for how we live. Number one triage of human worth by productivity or social usefulness is absolutely forbidden.
Wow. Yeah.
You cannot look at another human being, whether it's an employee, a sick relative, or a stranger on the street, and judge their value by their economic output. They are an indestructible image bearer destined for a physical resurrection.
That is so convicting. And number two, physical abuses. Things like human trafficking, labor exploitation, sexual immorality.
Right.
In this framework, these are not just unfortunate moral failings or personal mistakes. They are direct cosmic assaults on the very physical realities that God fully intends to raise and glorify.
It raises the stakes entirely. And number three, works of mercy. Healing the sick, poverty alleviation, caring for the physical environment.
Yeah.
These are not optional nice things to do to pass the time. They are literal rehearsals for the physical renewal of all things. When you feed someone or care for their physical needs, you are practicing for the resurrection.
The goal of this entire narrative is not the evacuation of Earth. It is filling the Earth with the knowledge and glory of its creator.
So to summarize this incredible dive into Mark Bates's essay, you are not a disposable smartphone shell.
You are not.
You are not a random biological accident whose worth is tied to a corporate timesheet.
Yeah.
You are an integrated, indestructible image bearer, and your destiny is a physical, scarred, and completely glorious resurrection.
Which brings us to a final thought I want you to mull over today.
Yeah, let's hear it.
If your physical body and your physical environment are destined to be part of a renewed eternal reality, think about the most mundane, repetitive physical task you have to do today. Maybe it's washing the dishes, maybe it's folding laundry or changing a diaper, or holding the hand of a sick relative. How would your approach to that exact moment change if you viewed it not as a temporary chore in a dying world, but as literal practice for inhabiting an eternal physical kingdom?
It completely changes the weight of the hardware, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The physical stuff isn't going in the drawer, it's getting the ultimate upgrade.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll see you next time.